I personally believe this is presently the most attractive electric car offered by Mercedes-Benz. Today, in the winter test, we will find out together what the EQE SUV is capable of. We'll talk about its design, discuss the surprise at the charging station and the consumption during winter, check how practical the trunk really is, and we'll talk about the software. And with that, hey and welcome to this exciting brand new video here with Jonas, and a warm welcome to the everyday driving test in the winter edition of the Mercedes-Benz EQE SUV 350 4Matic. Quite a relatively long name and also a rather large electric SUV, yet for me it's currently the most appealing vehicle from Mercedes. The EQC is becoming outdated, EQA and EQB are probably a bit too small and technically lagging behind, but the EQE hits a good middle ground, followed by the EQS SUV, which is really expensive. It starts at 75,000 euros, at least for me. We'll explain why that is in a moment. Before that, let's take a look at the car from the outside and make sure you subscribe to the channel for free. It helps me a lot in my work, costs you nothing, so click subscribe below the video, and now let's take a look at the car. Unmistakably, the EQE SUV has the same appearance as the current EQS SUV, and it also closely resembles the design of both the EQS and the EQE models. They all embody the design language that Mercedes assigned to their line of electric vehicles, which is soon expected to become a thing of the past. From what I've gathered, the future will probably see a trend of things coming back together again. What I find most appealing about the EQE's design is its look, as the car isn't so completely rounded off like some others. Additionally, there are clever features integrated into the design. The radar is behind the Mercedes logo, which is also heated, and there are these integrated headlights that seamlessly integrate into the light band. With the advanced digital light feature, they have what is arguably the best lighting technology available, especially alongside brands like Audi. Above all, the lighting, which we will look at shortly, is amazing. I also find this accent with the blue colors very cool. We know it, for instance, from Audi with the laser light, but here it is significant for the digital light. And this allows, for instance, such playful tricks here, so that with this matrix function, various things can also be projected onto the ground. That spans from arrows and full lane markings to obscuring other road users in true-to-life rectangles, not just partially or segmented, but with a significant level of actual detail and accuracy. The car has a sleek and stylish look in the evening and features a striking tail light signature. We're going to take a closer, detailed look at that soon, as I was genuinely impressed by the headlights themselves. Whether it's during rain, wet conditions, light snow, or even in complete darkness, they make driving noticeably clearer, simpler. In the side profile, you can easily see how the car has been further aerodynamically adjusted, although in the AMG line, it's not quite as evident as it is in the base model. Similar to all other EQ models, there is no windshield washer filler neck at the front, since the hood can only be opened in the workshop, which consequently means you also don't have a frunk available here. With the AMG package, there are optional 21-inch wheels available, which are also naturally aerodynamically optimized for better performance. I admire these wheels, especially with the sleek black outer ring and intricately fine inner spokes. It indeed looks quite chic, much like the stylish EQE logo on the side. There are clever design features such as the door handle, which elegantly extends outwards and is beautifully backlit. That really make the car stand out in its price range. The rear slopes down quite coupe-like, although it's important to mention that these black elements in the upper area serve aerodynamics and again extend the car at the back. And this continuous light strip at the rear is coolly done. It's about the details here, as there's a kind of jagged pattern going upwards. However, when shining from behind, it looks like a spiral, and the rear area is not as brightly lit. And that's a refreshing difference compared to the numerous standard continuous light strips commonly encountered. Before we get to the trunk, let's talk about the price first. The test car next to me, after customization, is around 110,000 euros, at least for me. As stated by the online configurator, I have already received a personal discount that has been subtracted directly on the website, because the list price itself would be at 121,000 euros. Nice that as a first-time customer, I get over 10,000 euros off directly on the website. And it follows suit. On the homepage, the car is listed at 75,965 euros. For me at least, since the base price is 83,470 euros. And you notice, Mercedes, They are currently taking a rather interesting approach regarding their marketing strategies and pricing tactics. And that's where individual discounts are already factored in, and it might well be that someone among you who already owns a Mercedes or just sweet talks the dealer, you can get the car even cheaper. The smallest all-wheel drive version that I'm testing here for you starts at 89,500 euros or just over 81,000 euros for me. I just find it quite funny to be able to compare it like that. There are then a few trim lines. On the outside, you can choose the AMG line, and inside there's either the electric art. There are 4 different packages, or the AMG line with 4 different packages. We have here the highest package, which costs over 20,000 euros extra, hence a total price of over 120,000 euros. And if you say now, wow, Jonas, that's way too much money for an electric car, feel free to check out InstaDrive below the video, where you can find used electric cars, including pre-owned Mercedes models, at an attractive subscription price. A monthly fee with all costs included, and most importantly, no residual value risk. Insurance, lease costs, maintenance, all in one bundle. Like right now, for instance, the Tesla Model 3 at home via InstaDrive. If you want to drive an electric car affordably, check below the video. Because if we're honest and calculate the total costs, then a subscription is significantly cheaper. That's why we, for example, also have the EV9 on a subscription. It's simply the best calculation, especially if you haven't been driving for 50 years and don't get extremely cheap insurance rates. I'll add a link just below the video for new electric cars available on subscription. And now we come to the trunk. It has a volume of 520 liters. And anyone who recently thought, wow, that's not much with 520 liters in the A6. I would say for an SUV, there isn't that much storage space here in the area. The trunk is quite deep and pretty wide, and there's an auxiliary compartment provided in the lower section. That's not exactly very huge. It extends a bit further towards the back. However, you can't open the top flap. Place them below and not remove them, meaning you can load a few things in the back or pack the Mercedes charging bag in here, which is also an energy kick, along with various other loading items. On the right at the back is the battery, the 12-volt battery, which is relatively unsightly because it takes up a lot of space, and the rear seats can be folded down in a 40-20-40 split. However, there is no remote release or anything similar, and optionally, there is a tow hitch, allowing you to tow 1.8 tons. If you fold down the seats, you get over 1,600 liters. That's quite reasonable. The stroller fits inside. However, due to this not so high height, you don't have much space left. And the blind definitely needs to go, and for me, it's now into the interior. Know one, know them all. This is currently the main feature for the interior, not only at Mercedes. No, we are seeing this pattern with more and more brands, a design that's consistent across the price range. And this is the optional hyperscreen in the case of the EQE SUV. The standard version includes a central display and the driver information display. Here, this is seamlessly integrated. All the displays use advanced OLED technology, which ensures that at night you truly experience 100% pure black values. And that genuinely enhances how impressive the passenger display is, because the stars, which are featured in the chosen wallpaper, or screensavers, are shown, and they seem to float into the space, making it hard to see exactly where the display boundary concludes. That's only the case at night, because during the day, you can see the edges pretty well. Mercedes is trying to work around that with their software. We'll look into it in more detail later. Some details, including the removable cup holders or the few actual buttons available, such as the control panel surrounding the start-stop button equipped with a fingerprint sensor and dynamic switch, as well as the seat control that is directly integrated into the door. Everything is of extremely high-quality craftsmanship. Yes, there is a lot of piano lacquer finish, but it all feels exceptionally well made. And it truly doesn't matter where you touch. You really get what you pay for here. That definitely needs to be emphasized, and with the Nappa leather interior, it truly is on the highest level. Unfortunately, there's no vegan interior version, and if you want the ventilated seats, you also need the Nappa leather. Additionally, there would be the option for padded headrests, similar to those we have seen before in the EQS. In the second row, you will find cushions. I'm just going to toss them up to the front now. We'll go ahead and leave the passenger cushion on for now. Just to clarify, the rear seats unfortunately cannot be adjusted in the backrest. They're positioned at this particular angle. It's quite reclined, yet somehow remains notably very comfortable. You see, I also have plenty of space. The front seat is adjusted for my height at 1.73 meters. I could easily move further back with no problem, and I can also stretch my legs out very comfortably. The floor is nice and low, which unfortunately hasn't been the case with some SUVs recently. You really sit comfortably because of it. There's an optional seat heater and also an air conditioning system here with an extra control panel in the lower area. This is a 4-zone climate control available on request here inside. And just like before, there's also extra stitching in the Nappa leather look here. And when we are discussing the seats, there's this feature here where you pull up, providing removable covers for the ISOFIX mounting points. I often find it disappointing when they fall out and aren't made easily removable or don't feature a zipper. But in the end, it's a design decision. What I like is that there's ambient lighting in the back, also in this part where the window control is located. And also, the Boommaster sauna system in the back is well made. You really have to say that. Certainly down here, this area consists of hard plastic, but the rest is beautifully foam-backed, providing both a high-quality appearance and a luxurious feel. There's a lamp back here merely to tick off that box on the list. It doesn't really have any specific function behind it. I find the glass roof to be really quite lovely. However, it's somewhat regrettable that it is divided right in the middle by a rigidity beam. Because you can't open it or anything like that, it's genuinely just a matter of rigidity, so they didn't allow the glass roof to be entirely bypassed at this spot. You can close it using a roller shade, and it's important to note that there's a center armrest in the rear with a 2-tiered storage compartment available here. On the one hand, like this, you can put a phone in there if you want. You can also slide it forward one level. There are 2 cup holders, which I find cool with this feature. Down here, let's see, there are 2 USB-C slots. They are hidden behind the flap. A child seat, as we mentioned ISOFIX earlier, fits in easily. Even the swivel seat fits comfortably, even if the passenger sits a bit further back. There's ample space available. You can take a look at the pictures above right here. You travel in a very comfortable manner with it. The headrests are somewhat high. These are almost like minor concerns, but considering you get from the front, a better view. So, well, now they want to go down again. I'd say we take advantage of that too. I'm moving ahead and talking with the driver in Berg. We're starting in the city environment once more because the vehicle, particularly the smaller 350 version, is likely going to be frequently used in urban areas. And 2 things come to mind. First, there's adaptive recuperation, which is really good and lets you coast nicely. And on the other hand, there's also a normal recuperation where you can set the whole thing in 3 different levels. Unfortunately, it doesn't bring the car to a full stop. I would have liked that feature, as it would enhance the overall driving experience in cities. Then I could drive right up to the traffic light, lift my foot off the gas pedal, and the car would come to a stop. In adaptive recuperation, the car actually stops behind the leader. And I find that very good because we haven't had that with other manufacturers lately, and that needs to be positively highlighted. On roads like these in the countryside, you can genuinely feel both the all-wheel drive and the remarkable power of the vehicle, because the car doesn't have so little power. When I step on it here, it presses you quite well into the seat. And if you really don't absolutely need more power, I believe you almost don't need the bigger battery at all, honestly. But let's talk on the highway about why the difference isn't really that significant. I find it very, very comfortable in here, and to get that out of the way, the car is incredibly quiet. Except for one thing, the steering wheel. That creaks ever so slightly. You'll primarily notice it when maneuvering and less so during regular driving. Yet it's odd when a car is seemingly perfectly constructed, when everything aligns just as I envision it. And then the steering wheel area back here simply creaks. Now, it could of course be specific to this particular vehicle and not really be a widespread issue with the EQE SUV. In the inner city, you can also benefit from something I had mentioned earlier on, namely the rear axle steering. It's so clever that this car boasts a very small turning circle. You specifically captured this from above, and then you can also see the rear axle turning sharply. That's truly crazy, and parking becomes somewhat tricky because of that. You get used to it quickly, but driving into driveways is completely different because you take the corner faster, and you really have to get used to that. At our house, it was like a day or 2 of getting used to when I had this here. Then it quickly becomes second nature, then you have to get used to the other cars again, just like with so many other things out there. I thought it was really crucial to say this at this precise point because it's definitely not just appealing in the city alone. No, we'll discuss that later as we drive on the highway. However, this feature makes the car not only nimble but quite responsive as well. Yet, passengers in the back seats might feel some discomfort as the axle moves beneath them, which often results in a less comfortable ride overall, that you get nauseous more quickly. So let's quickly accelerate here, just overtake. And that's exactly what I meant. The performance is entirely sufficient. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a clicking sound from the footwell when I change the driving mode after the display clicks. I'm unsure if they're changing the relay or doing something else. Either way, there's a definite mechanical sound from down there. And I have to say, that's a bit wet. If a car is too quiet, you can hear, as I just mentioned, the resonator. And you really hear such noises more because this car is incredibly well isolated. When you're out in daily life, in the city or countryside, you hear nothing from the surroundings. Only the Audi A6 recently was even quieter. That really blew me away. But here in the EQE, it's a very good level. Even from outside, you see the suspension keeping the body almost perfectly straight. And with the air suspension constantly adjusting, that's really driving on a very, very high level. That's what Mercedes is known for. It'd be terrible if it failed here. In my everyday life, I typically found myself often using the individual setting, and it provided the comfort I preferred in the engine and steering. However, the dampers were adjusted to be a bit firmer, simply because I didn't want it to be overly soft and wanted to experience a bit more of the road's character. A completely underrated feature for me is the traffic light itself, which is always placed directly in front of you here. Then I can see the traffic light, even if it's obscured. There's a little camera behind here that shows it to you, and then you get a nice display of the traffic light image. Makes sure that you don't always look so weird in the city and makes life a bit easier. And that's just one of the many features I really like. For instance, the AR arrows that are often shown here. Though it's a bit disappointing they're not in the head-up display considering how large it is. But that's probably reserved just for the EQS models. We'll stick with the topic of display, but won't dive too deep into the details. I already showed you that this year with the EQS. Here, I'm much more focused on performance, and that's where Mercedes could make some improvements. You can definitely tell the image processor has to work hard, especially when you compare it to what's ultimately shown visually, because that really can't be overlooked here. It's a truly massive display that actively interacts with everything being shown visually. Sounds silly, but the software is adjusted so that the water reflects, buildings are constructed, and many things are beautifully rendered in 3 dimensions. Sometimes, however, the processor doesn't quite keep up. As I'm talking about it right now, it has loaded the route to Hamburg in the background, and you can see all the charging stops nicely here. They are clever too and use the perfect charging ranges, so you're not just blindly charging from 10 to 80%, but rather unplugging at 60 or 70% to arrive as efficiently as possible at your destination. This allows you to adjust the charge level at the destination and the charging stations flexibly. And here too, you can notice in some spots, it just takes a bit in the system. What I couldn't seem to find is a filtering option specifically for the charging station providers. Feel free to correct me in the comments if you find anything. And then there's the option to throw this display onto the passenger display. The entire system is interconnected and has the capability to be utilized together seamlessly. When I watch videos on the passenger display and glance over as the driver, the content immediately stops. In this case, it's not like with Audi, where a layer acts as a sort of privacy shield covering the display. No, it's actually dependent on my visibility as a driver. For instance, I am unable to mirror Apple CarPlay, and generally speaking, it is restricted to specific functions. What I really appreciate, however, is that a lot of settings and functions can be controlled through the steering wheel. Whether it's the driver information display or the main display, you have these kind of small trackpads that greatly simplify the process of operating this expansive screen while you're driving. And if you've already ordered it and find that you like it, you can thus easily and quickly move to the right and left as needed. The only thing you can't do from the steering wheel is skip audio tracks. You can either assign this function to the star button or control it via the display. And then there are the Mercedes' own apps, for example, YouTube Web, and you can comfortably enjoy your favorite YouTubers on the screen, whether you are stationary or on the passenger display while driving. When digital extras are nicely described, the system comes with additional enhancements and various expansions included. You can, mind you, use various additional features either on a lifetime basis or through a subscription service within a certain area, such as the in-car office or parking payment, albeit for a fee. I think it's really clever that they've integrated it. For the moment, I'll set aside the topic of payment. Then we need to talk about one more point, which is the cameras. They are really beautifully high resolution and adjust accordingly. You receive a practical top-down view, and you can switch seamlessly between the various camera perspectives. Additionally, you get a 3D view, which naturally experiences some distortion issues when displaying detailed views, but it shows where and how much distance you have, making parking very practical, and it also works at night because the vehicle uses the side lamps to enhance the camera image. During the test period, we almost consistently experienced temperatures between 0 and 5 degrees, so it was quite wintry, and that had a considerable impact on the vehicle's consumption. Just now, as we left home, I had a consumption of 28 kilowatt hours. Not the best score. We were also on a stretch of just country road and 1 or 2 towns. The consumption was then at 24.3 kilowatt hours, and that's quite high because there are comparable vehicles in that size also with all-wheel drive that have this consumption. Have on the highway, we'll see its highway consumption shortly. Before that, it needs to head to the charging station. According to Mercedes, the EQE SUV in either the 350 or the 350 4Matic version charges from 10% to 80% in approximately 32 minutes. Then you might think, well, it's not the best value. Let's see how it fares at around 0 degrees outside temperature. And I was really surprised because, I always keep track of the time. Started at 7%, waited until 10, then paused until reaching 80. And there we were now, after 28 minutes and 20 seconds back at 80%. You charge over 70 kilowatt hours during that time, and for me, that's an okay value because it's a range where a Q8 e-tron with the new product generation and larger battery is, and also a BMW iX. Share your thoughts below. I'm really curious to hear what you all think, but it's notably better than the manufacturer's spec, especially given the current temperatures. I find that remarkable. Plus, you can charge with 22 kilowatts optionally, so if you're charging in the city or at a client's, it makes sense to choose the option. It's part of the largest equipment package and then allows you to double the AC speed. The charging flap opens electrically, but only optionally. I charged, of course, with the Maingau Energy card, still the easiest way for me to just quickly tap the card, and at most charging stations, you can do that, especially as a Maingau electricity customer. Charge relatively cheaply. Charging prices are a current topic, but having a simple charging card and being able to unlock it everywhere is often worth more than downloading the 10th app again. And especially if you charge more often while on the go, it can actually be worth it. I find distinguishing between AC and DC also really important. That's why feel free to check below the video if you want to apply for the charging card. It's always good to have a backup like this. But now on the highway, the EQE SUV is just as serene and quiet as it was before, on the country road. The only change is that the wind noise in the upper area increases. Street noise is barely noticeable. Those are the acoustic conditions at a speed of 150 kilometers per hour. Yeah, up here I'd really appreciate a bit less noise, but the car is impressively well insulated from outside sounds, which makes driving long distances extremely and very highly comfortable indeed. And the assistance systems work well with that. So now let's set it straight to 145 kilometers per hour. It genuinely maintains itself well and incorporates every feature one might wish for. For example, an active lane change assistant. It always shows you on the display which lanes are currently possible to switch to and then moves over quite reasonably. Perhaps it could be somewhat faster, but I genuinely believe that's simply the current standard with systems of this kind. The 765 Newton meters of torque are really brutal, so when I step on it here, you can feel it pushes quite well and doesn't need any more horsepower. About 290 horsepower that this car has. As I mentioned earlier, completely sufficient. And so it truly drives remarkably well. The seating comfort, which is quite characteristic for Mercedes, is extremely well executed. We have the Napa leather seats installed here. They fit perfectly, of course. You can adjust all of that individually quite well. And I also have a very pleasant massage that hey Mercedes, start my massage. Can easily activate. Nevertheless, of course, there are plenty of other different functions that you can modify or adjust right here in the vehicle using the voice input system. Can activate. It's on a very high level. Also, the massage is excellent, offering pressure point therapy, not just relaxation, with options like hot stone or similar. That's really quite cool, and it significantly enhances the comfort of long-distance drives. And I also find the seating position well done in here. And I like this display better than in the EQS. I had previously criticized that the driver information display was too steep. However, here it feels like the entire hyperscreen is slightly more upright, and since you're naturally in a higher seating position in an SUV, it doesn't stand out as much. Because I tend to look down on it more anyway. In the EQS, I felt a bit like I was always looking up at it. Then it reflected more. One more note on reflecting I mustn't forget. During the night, you can see the air vent on the left reflecting here stunningly illuminated. Unfortunately, in my position right in the rear view, then I can't see anything. I experienced that with the Tavascan as well. A light element was reflecting right over there. And that really puzzles me because surely someone must have checked it out at night and noticed, oh, I can't really see much of anything anymore. And then design over function apparently, and then it was just kept in. On the highway, I drove a stretch at a constant 130 kilometers per hour for you with an outside temperature of 3 degrees, and I was quite surprised to see a consumption of 33 kilowatt hours in comfort mode. I drove in one direction, turned around, and then back in the other direction to balance the topography properly. It's somewhat hilly as you go from Augsburg to Günzburg, but definitely not enough to cause the fuel consumption to be that high. I think it's genuinely too much. Please go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments. And it sort of aligns with what I experienced in my daily life, managing to get below 20 kilowatt hours. At these temperatures which we just had in the winter, that was hardly the case. However, on the Highway 33, there's genuinely quite a lot, because with 90.5 kilowatt hours as the usable battery capacity, it means you're looking at, after driving 250-60 kilometers, you need to go back to a charging station. For such a large vehicle in this segment, that is simply not an adequate range for me. If someone says, well then, just go for the 350 plus or 500 variant, they actually have the 96 kilowatt hour battery. To be honest, 5.5 kilowatt hours more isn't a big deal. And it's not like I would say, wow, that gets you so much further. With other manufacturers, the differences are significantly higher. Here, it hardly makes a difference because you also, with the increased performance you get in the other variants, you'd usually expect to have higher consumption as well. The limit is at 210 kilometers per hour, and up to that point, all the assistance systems work. Now, let's get to the conclusion and the sound you hear next to me. That's certainly not a UFO landing somewhere behind our office. No, that's actually just the car when it's sitting stationary. You have the option to turn on both exterior and interior sounds. I'm not very fond of interior noise, but it's quite useful when a car may become noticeable at slower speeds, alerting others nearby, and you have the option to switch it off if you want. Whether it's needed while stationary is the question, because until I lock it, the sound remains. There are other peculiar sounds too, such as when you're reversing. The car blinks and emits noises, being similar to a garbage truck. And I find that a bit unfortunate because it doesn't quite do the car justice. Because my initial thesis that this is the best electric model from Mercedes, I can confirm. It's really a good car. Yeah, we don't need to talk about the consumption. It's quite tall. You could also consider an Audi Q6 or even a Porsche Macan for comparison, which are both in a similar size range. Maybe even an Audi Q8 because it kind of stands in between, and a BMW iX. They really consume a lot, so it's essentially just a massive SUV. I'm really surprised it consumes as much as our Kia EV9, which provides more spaciousness and extra power in its all-wheel drive system. I couldn't really fully grasp it here as it actually seems much more streamlined in its overall design. In itself, however, it is a really good car that especially looks significantly better than the other models. An EQA and an EQB feel too cobbled together to me, an EQS is too rounded, and the EQS SUV also has that shape. And this one still seems like a solid, typical SUV model from Mercedes, keeping that classic vibe. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The price is very high, but it is also a Mercedes. Who said years ago they only wanted to be in the luxury sector. I'd say they're not quite there yet, but it's already relatively expensive. In return, you receive some fantastic highlights that you won't find with the competition and also this surprising load value. Share your feedback in the comments. Here's my review of the pre-facelift EQS, doing proper justice to this exceptional Mercedes offering. Below, you will find the Audi Q6 e-tron, the direct competitor.